Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Every year in my life, there comes a time for me to do what I call my conclave moment. And this is it. This is when I enter the arena of ideas and ideals with all of you. And I must say, I look forward to it. So here I am again to welcome you to the 7th India Today Conclave. A very warm welcome to you from me. Thank you all for being here. Today I can say it with a greater sense of confidence and pride that in the calendar of ideas, the India Today Conclave has become a much anticipated event. It has become a place where concepts collide, arguments provoke, and ideas flourish. It brings together the best and brightest leaders and pioneers from every field of knowledge. It has become a project in tomorrow, sustained by India Today's faith in the transformative powers of a questioning mind. This year is no exception. We have a list of speakers who continue to breach the frontiers of their expertise. We have a program that I hope will challenge the dead certainties of politics, business, science, spirituality, and entertainment. That will engage your intellect and enrich your perception. Together, we have come a long way. As I look back, I realize it has been a journey in history. And history, as I said last year, seems to have entered into a secret covenant with the conclave. For me, and I'm sure for everyone who's been here before, it has been a journey that has made us wiser and a lot more optimistic. It began 6 years ago in the aftermath of 9/11, when the politics of fear ruled the world and the politics of hate divided it. It was a rude awakening from the post-Cold War stupor. In retrospect, it provided a historical backdrop to the first India Today Conclave. It is an understatement to say that the world has changed drastically since then. It is an altogether different matter whether our leadership has changed in equal measure to deal with this world. If Afghanistan set the stage for war on terror, Iraq became the first fully fledged battleground of the 21st century. Today, though it is a battleground where the initial idealism of an Iraq without Saddam Hussein is being replaced by a sense of moral cynicism. Today the debate is more about the liberator and least about the liberated. At home too, it has not been a placid period. The first conclave was held at a time when India's first right-wing government was in power, and it looked invincible with the country's most popular politician. Few guessed an India Shining slogan would undo India's romance with the right, and the Congress, propped by the left, returned to power. Fortunately, oblivious of the leadership changes, the Indian economy continues to roll on the fast track. And in an age of globalization, India, as a financial destination, remains very much in vogue. As any global rich list will vindicate, India is fast emerging as the most fertile land of billionaires, as it is of the dispossessed as well, I must add. A volatile politics and a robust economy are matched by an outward-looking foreign policy. India, though rather belatedly, began to break out of its mindset of third worldism. Its engagement with the world has sought to strike a balance between national interest and international responsibility. It is a welcome change. Sadly, India has still home to the last custodians of a fossilized ideology, and they have the power to hold the government to ransom in the name of anti-imperialism. The last ism of desperate revolutionaries who have nothing at stake except a few borrowed slogans. But well, that's Indian democracy. It's large enough to accommodate the capitalist and the commissar. In the first 5 conclaves, we captured the spirit of a nation that was undergoing immense political and economic churning. We identified opportunities, exposed fault lines, celebrated potentials, and offered a blueprint for tomorrow. On the stage were some of the finest minds, heads of states and CEOs, statesmen and scientists, Nobel laureates and other icons. An ideal India emerged out of this carnival of ideas. Last year, we widened the horizon, so to speak. We went global. Maybe we had no choice but to keep pace with the new India. So our theme was Challenges for the Brave New World. In the end, it was about a brave new India as well. Once the challenges of the brave new world have been grappled with, you may well ask, what's next? Well, we have taken the argument further in the theme of the 7th conclave, Leadership for the 21st Century. I believe our theme, as in the past, reads the pulse of the times. One issue that concentrates the global mind at the moment, I'm sure you'll agree, is the issue of leadership. As we all know, a thrilling leadership battle is being played out in the world's most influential democracy. We need only to look at the Democratic primaries in America to get some pointers what different leaders are offering. The defining words on the stump are words like change versus continuity, hope versus experience, dream versus reality, freedom versus security, privilege versus entitlement. We need only to look at President George Bush's moral adventurism to realize how his post-9/11 leadership has divided the public opinion at home and abroad, and how it has set the stage for a new debate on America's place in the world, on war, on freedom, and national sovereignty. Let me quote Barack Obama, the freshman senator who wants to become the next president of the United States. He says, "This century's threats are at least as dangerous as in some ways more complex than those we have confronted in the past. Those threats demand a new vision of leadership in the 21st century, a vision that draws from the past but is not bound by the outdated thinking." And that's the operational word, outdated thinking. The new century demands a new approach from our leadership class. The awareness is apparent in countries that have undergone a change of guard recently. Nicolas Sarkozy in post-Chirac France is known not only for his bling-bling presidency or his romantic conquests. As a bold reformer, he has targeted the many privileges of the welfare state. In the United Kingdom, after a superb beginning, the man who inherited the mantle from Tony Blair is desperately trying to halt the rising popularity of his young conservative challenger. Even in Russia, the strong leader had to make a kind of democratic gesture by anointing a successor, although there is no dispute who holds the real power. Even in the People's Republic of China, where changes are not that dramatic and faces don't fade out that easily, still, we can't miss a gradual generational change shift happening in the higher echelons of the country. And the leadership is getting more sensitive to the public sentiment. That is a big change in China. Leadership is the issue that resonates across India's borders too. In Pakistan, particularly today, even in a bonsai democracy, democracy is an ideal worth fighting for and worth dying for too. Benazir Bhutto, the gala dinner speaker at the last conclave, promised she would return if elected Prime Minister. She told us, "I am committed to bringing peace between our two countries. We cannot fail our children." Sadly, she was denied a chance. Her homecoming came to an abrupt and tragic end. It was an unsolicited martyrdom in a merciless land where hate settled the argument on leadership. We will miss her. Next door, as Nepal prepares for a post-monarchy era, the question is all about the alternative. Is a Maoist Nepal The ideal in this century, the question has to be answered democratically, not the revolutionary way. India too will soon decide who should be leading the nation next. In the true Indian tradition, the general elections would be a referendum on the competing ideas of India. The much celebrated India of a million possibilities requires a leadership whose gaze extends beyond the expediencies of short-term politics. We need a leadership which is bold, energetic, impatient, and willing to shed the burdens of the past. Ladies and gentlemen, the last century was a grand narrative of extreme passions. Its history was shaped by revolutions, liberations, and exterminations. Nations were born, built, and subjugated. It was an age of leaders larger than life, leaders with a capital L. The most messianic of them promised heaven on earth and gave hell. There were revolutionaries, freedom fighters, nation builders, mass murderers, and warmongers. They were a formidable lot, driven by dreams and fantasy, idealism and ideology. Gandhi, Lenin, Mao, Hitler, Stalin, Churchill, de Gaulle, Truman, Kennedy, Reagan, Thatcher, Mrs. Gandhi, Gorbachev, I could go on and on. We're yet to outlive their legacies, for better or for worse. We're still in the glow of the 21st century, and the challenges it illuminates are no less intimidating. They are more than political and economic. They are cultural, digital, ecological, religious, scientific, and ethical. The new century needs a leadership that is not subordinated to ideology, but ideas. Ladies and gentlemen, the next 2 days will give us an idea about what it takes to be a leader for the new century. You'll be provided by speakers who continue to redefine leadership in accordance with the spirit of the times. Among them, we'll have a former President of America who was the best of his generation and who may return to the White House as the first spouse. As an apostle of humanitarianism, he's a global leader nevertheless. A former American vice president who almost became president. Many say he should have. Nobel laureate and eco-warrior, he has shown that you don't have to be the leader of the free world to lead the fight for a better planet. A scientist who plays God, the tallest politician from the Indian right, and who could be the next Prime Minister. A spiritual leader who defies the stereotype. A superstar with a conscience, the fourth richest man in the world, and many more who are not prisoners of the past. It is said that every nation gets the leader it deserves. I am pleased with the leaders this conclave has brought together. We deserve them, and I hope you enjoy them. Thank you. I'm afraid you'll have more of me. I'm going to introduce our next keynote speaker. All is on. Ladies and gentlemen, let me now welcome our inaugural keynote speaker of the conclave, William Jefferson Clinton, the 42nd President of the United States and one of the world's most extraordinary leaders. Bill Clinton, as he's better known, is very much a leader of the 21st century, although he held the most powerful office of the world in the tail end of the 20th century. You may well ask, why is he the leader of the 21st century? Let me tell you. Because during his terms, the world was undergoing momentous changes that would in many ways shape the 21st century. Because he's a brand. And not only that, he's a worldwide brand and can do things and ask for things no one else can. Because he has reinvented himself to become a tireless advocate and prodigious fundraiser for humanitarian causes, in particular AIDS. Because he is still one of the world's most gifted politicians, a public communicator without compare. Because he still makes an enormous difference in the world. I had the privilege of being invited for dinner at his home close to New York a few years ago. It was a sort of coming out party for him. It was after his quadruple bypass given by his wife and daughter. It was there that I witnessed the extraordinary affection and loyalty they command amongst their friends and well-wishers. And it was mutual. They're obviously formidable friends. And as Mr. Obama is finding out, they're also formidable foes. They were charming hosts, and I saw them move around amongst their guests, and it was clear to me that whatever may happen in the elections, they will still remain the first political couple of America. That is also where I observed the gift President Clinton is known for, which is to make you feel the center of the world when he's talking to you, at the same time an almost contradictory ability of covering a lot of ground. He's a man in a hurry without seeming to be. And he describes this well in his book, My Life. He was born 3 months after his biological father died in a car accident. Since the beginning, he has always lived with a sense of ambiguous urgency. This is what he wrote in his memoir. My father left me with the feeling that I had to live for 2 people, and that if I did it well enough, somehow I could make up for the life he should have had. And his memory infused me at a younger age than most with a sense of my own mortality. The knowledge that I too could die young drove me both to drain the most out of every moment of life and to get on with the next big challenge. Even when I wasn't sure where I was going, I was always in a hurry. More recently, in 2006, he said, I'm about to be 60 years old, and I damn near died, and I'm worried about how many lives I save before I die. That gives you an idea of what is driving him these days, besides, of course, getting Hillary into the White House. When he was elected president for the first term, he was just 47 years of age, defeating incumbent George H.W. Bush with the slogan, "It's the economy, stupid." He was the 3rd youngest U.S. president, next only to John F. Kennedy and Theodore Roosevelt. Clinton and his running mate, Albert Gore, who will be delivering the final day's dinner keynote address, represented a new generation of American political leadership that was young, optimistic, and with an agenda for change. In his inaugural presidential address, Clinton memorably said, "There's nothing wrong with America that cannot be cured by what is right in America." Domestically, Clinton's tenure as president saw the longest peace economic expansion in American history, the lowest unemployment rate in modern times, the lowest inflation in 30 years, a huge budget surplus, and the lowest poverty rates. Such was his ability to identify with the disadvantaged classes in America that Nobel laureate Toni Morrison would call Clinton America's first black president. Her reason, and I quote, "Clinton displays almost every trope of blackness. Single-parent household, born poor, working class, saxophone playing, McDonald's and junk food loving boy from Arkansas." When he ended his record term as President of America in 2001, he was just 55 years old. But Clinton didn't just quietly fade away, as most of his predecessors did. As he explained in an interview, and I quote, "You can sit there and feel sorry that you're not president anymore, or you can find some way to use what you know and who you know about how to do things and go out there and do all the good you can." That's exactly what Bill Clinton did. He made the entire world his stage and doing all the good he could to make a dent into problems that could derail this century's progress. In the 8 years since he began the William J. Clinton Foundation, it has launched a handful of initiatives that raises annually over $130 million and has impacted millions of people over 100 countries. For instance, the Foundation's HIV/AIDS initiative concentrates on bringing high-quality, low-cost care to people living in over 66 countries that has resulted in prices of critical drugs for treatment dropping substantially. True leadership, I believe, is when you can exercise power when you're out of power. And nobody has done this better than President Clinton. When we invited him to address the India Day Conclave in 2003, Bill Clinton gave us a glimpse of the future when he said, "The greatest challenge of the 21st century is to figure out how to build countries and the world where we have shared benefits, shared responsibilities, and shared values." Ladies and gentlemen, for these and a host of other reasons, Bill Clinton remains an iconic contemporary leader, known for his idealism and energy, his dazzling intelligence, and his mighty heart. I can't think of anyone more eminently suited than him to show us the way and give us an insight into the leadership that is needed to overcome the challenges of the 21st century. And ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't seen charisma travel over 10,000 miles in thin air, you're going to see it now. I present to you William Jefferson Clinton, 42nd President of the United States. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Aroon. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I must say I was so taken by that introduction that I hardly know what to say. If I had any sense, I probably wouldn't say anything. But I thank you for giving me the chance to address you. I wish I were there with you. As you know, I can't leave the United States now because Hillary's in a critical phase of her campaign. But I am delighted to have this chance to speak to you and to the India Today Conclave participants. I thank you for having me back, and I congratulate you on having Vice President Gore close the conclave. He won a well-deserved Nobel Prize for his lifetime commitment to doing something about global warming, and it's very, very important to the considerations that India and all of Asia have to make about how to grow their economy in the future. So I think you're going to have a great closing session. I understand that I'm supposed to talk for a few minutes today, and then we're going to have a few questions. So, if you will, I'd just like to offer a few thoughts building on the themes that you mentioned at the end of your introduction. When I spoke to the India Today Conclave in 2003, I had the opportunity to say that we should build a world of positive interdependence, not negative interdependence, and that to do that, we had to deal with the challenges of building shared opportunities, creating shared responsibilities, giving the world and each nation a sense of shared community across all our divisions based on a set of basic values, the most important of which is that our differences are quite significant and they make life more interesting, but our common humanity matters more. In the years which have elapsed, in these 5 years, as we look back on them, we see an enormous amount of progress and significant and persistent peril, reminding us again that every nation and every region in this interdependent global environment is bedeviled by 3 problems. The first is persistent, enduring inequality. Inequality in employment and incomes, in access to education and health care. The second is the insecurity of the current circumstances, because our interdependence means we have to be open to forces beyond our borders, both positive and negative, which includes terror, the prospect of being exposed to dangerous nuclear, chemical, or biological materials, the danger of a global epidemic like avian influenza. And finally, the course that we're on is unsustainable because of the undeniable reality of global warming, which we see manifest over and over again in currently and rapidly changing circumstances in the global environment. So as we look ahead, we can celebrate the last 5 years and what it's done for India. I mean, look at the lives of the people at this conclave. Look at the enormous burst of creativity and strength and economic and political influence in India. Look at the generation of new wealth. Look at the fact that India now has the world's largest middle class. But here you see persistent inequality, continued sporadic violence, and you have to face the fact that global warming requires us to change the trajectory of growth in terms of our energy usage. Can we do these things? Can the positive elements of the interdependent world of the 21st century outweigh the negative ones? That is the great overarching question of our time. A lot of the specific elements and questions have to be answered by political leaders. That's why elections matter in the United States and India and everywhere else. But I spend a lot of my time asking and trying to answer the question of what civil society can do. What can we do, those of us who are private citizens, who are not in political power, who will never be in political power, but who have access to resources and human creativity in a world where the non-governmental sector is more influential than ever before. You certainly see this in India, where there are over 500,000 non-governmental organizations operating in very poor villages and funded by very wealthy individuals. You see it all over the country. In the United States, we have an amazing number of non-governmental groups, and half of them have been established in this decade by people who believe that civil society can make a difference in tackling these big problems. And essentially what I try to do with my foundation and my work around the world is to take people's good intentions and turn them into reality in other people's lives. So I'd like to talk about that a little bit in terms of the challenges we face. And then when we come to the end of that, I know we're going to have a question and answer session, and I like those because at least I know in a question and answer session I'm talking about something that all of you are interested in instead of something that I'm interested in. Hopefully it'll be the same thing, but it isn't always. But let's just begin with the World Health Crisis. A quarter of all the people on Earth this year will die of AIDS, TB, malaria, and infections related to dirty water, diarrhea, dysentery, cholera. 80% of the people in that last category will be children under 5. By and large, these are the diseases of the poor. To be sure, in the wealthy countries, there are people who have AIDS, but if they take the medicine properly and if they maintain their diet and exercise regime and do what they're supposed to do, most of them can live a reasonably normal life expectancy at reasonably high levels of health. The diseases of the poor ram home the inequality of the world. Working with indispensable partners in India, the great generic drug producers there, Ranbaxy, Cipla, and several other Indian companies, we have arranged to provide the world's least expensive high-quality AIDS medicine to adults and children all over the world. We're now serving 1.4 million people around the world. And that's an astonishing thing when you consider that just a couple of years ago, when we began this project in 2003, only 200,000 people in 4 countries around the world who needed AIDS medicine to stay alive were getting it. And most of those were in Brazil and Thailand, where the government was providing the medicine. So we're serving about 1 million for the people. The United States government program, I think, is serving about that number. The Global Fund on AIDS, TB, and Malaria is serving about that number. So we have come a long way. There's some overlap in those numbers, but we're coming closer to the goal of making sure that no poor person has to die of AIDS simply because they live in a poor country. And none of this would have been possible without a remarkable change in business strategy by the Indian pharmaceutical companies. And it's the sort of thing that we all ought to be thinking about in terms of how we can both do well in the world and do good. Because what the big companies decided to do with our help was to change their business strategy with regard to AIDS medicine. Instead of selling a relatively low volume of drugs with a relatively high profit margin per dose, we got them to go to very, very high volumes at lower profit margins. And that enabled a whole world to open up with the limited amount of funds that we had available to save people's lives. But I want to make it clear that no one I work with is ever asked to lose money. We always ask people to make a profit, but to do it in a different way. This is the sort of thing the non-governmental movement can do. And we have seen it dramatically with regard to children. A couple of years ago, when we started trying to provide pediatric AIDS medicine, only 10,000 children in the world who needed the low-dose, different-dose pediatric AIDS medicine were getting it, and 500,000 kids a year were dying of AIDS. Now we have over 300,000 children on this medicine because we lowered the price of children's pediatric AIDS medicine from $600 a person a year to $60 a person a year. Again, thanks in large measure to our partners in India. But they're still making money. They're just making money in a completely different way, with very high volumes and low profit margins. That, plus the work that we do in many countries in building health systems, building nutrition programs, doing AIDS prevention and education work, has made a real difference. Not only in India, but in many countries in Africa, in Asia, and Latin America. We sell this medicine all over the world. Most of the medicine now is sold in 55 countries, but about 70 are eligible to buy it. So that's just one example of what we can do. Another big problem in the developing world with regard to health care is the absence of systems. We find this with health, with education, with economic development. So our foundation also tries to build functioning systems. If you think about how you all came to be there today, look, I can see you through the monitor. All of you are there having a nice dinner. You're going to drink that bottled water. You have absolutely no doubt that it's good water. You're going to have a good meal, and you have no doubt that the food is well prepared. You expect the sound equipment to work here. You take for granted that you'll be comfortable in that room. Most of those conditions are absolutely unavailable to a vast number of people in the world, where half the world's people live on less than $2 a day and 1 billion on less than $1 a day. And largely it's not because they're not intelligent and not because they're incapable of learning things, and certainly not because they don't work hard. It's because they do not have access to systems, the kinds of systems we take for granted that make the generation of wealth possible, that make comfortable lives possible, that make the very building blocks of a good life possible in terms of health and education and shelter. So my foundation does a lot of work to help build systems. We have 25 countries in Africa where we're actually trying to build the health systems from the ground up. We are working in 2 countries trying to build health, education, and economic systems simultaneously, with some of the lessons we learned in the AIDS Project, in our Clinton Hunter Development Initiative in Rwanda and Malawi. We have doubled and sometimes tripled farmers' income by doing what we did with AIDS drugs. We've lowered the cost of seed. We've lowered the cost of fertilizer. We've improved the distribution from farm to market. And we've had a remarkable success. And simultaneously, we've built healthcare systems from the ground up. This can be done all over the world, but in the end, I'm convinced it's one of the most important things the non-governmental system can do, to empower people at the local level to create their own systems so that there is a real connection between the effort they exert and the results they achieve. We're now attempting to do it on a much larger scale, beginning in Latin America, then ultimately going to Asia and going to Africa and countries where mining occurs. The mining industry is one of the few industries that you can be absolutely sure will increase its profitability in every year between now and the year 2050, because the world's population is projected to grow from its current level of 6.5 billion to 9 billion. We can slow that a little bit if we could get all the girls in the world in school, and that's another thing I'm trying to do. But even so, we could only take maybe 1 billion off that number. There will be more people in the world in 2050 than there are now. And we have to do something to try to deal with that. But meanwhile, miners will make more money because they'll have to take more things out of the ground for all the people that will be living in the world. More and more of these big mining companies are concerned that when they close up shop and move away, the people they leave behind will have nothing to live on. and the land may not be well cared for, depending on what the local government regulations are. So we have put together a consortium of 24 mining companies seeded with $300 million to try to build sustainable economies for the long run, environmentally responsible economies with good jobs, good healthcare systems, and good education systems in mining communities across the world, beginning in Colombia, Peru, and Mexico, and eventually spreading out to mining communities in Asia and Africa. It's very exciting. We already have about 26 companies signed on. But again, we're trying to build systems. Will we be successful? I can't be sure. But I am absolutely sure that we're working on the right things. We work only in partnerships with governments. We don't try to be at cross purposes with them. But we know that in many of these developing countries, the governments simply do not have the capacity on their own to build the kind of systems that have made the success of all of you in the room possible. And I think it's very important that we try to do that whenever we can. So I'm working on that. Finally, let me just say a word about the sustainability issue. I believe that global warming is a real and persistent problem. I do not believe it will be addressed unless we can prove that we can change our energy patterns and essentially move into a post-carbon future in a way that is good for the economy, not just of the wealthy countries, not just the United States and Europe and Japan, but especially of the emerging countries, and particularly of China and India, but also Indonesia, Brazil, Mexico, all the other emerging economies. If we cannot prove that you can change the pattern of energy usage in a way that is good economics, then I don't think anything we do in America or Europe or Japan will make any difference. I think the planet will be irrevocably damaged by mid-century, and our children and grandchildren will live a much reduced life. So the question is, can we do this? And the answer is, nobody knows for sure, but I think so. And I devote a lot of my time now to working with cities around the world, proving that there are things you can do on energy, on water management, that will make a real difference and actually boost economic growth. Our climate change initiatives works with 40 cities on 6 continents to prove that it's good economics over the long run to save the planet for our children and grandchildren. We work in Paris, for example. We're retrofitting 660 elementary schools. We're going to save energy, cut the cost of the school budget, train lots of people for new jobs, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We're doing the same thing in New York City with the Public Housing Authority, where we're going to cut the annual electric bill from $500 million a year to $350 million a year, train hundreds of low-skilled workers who are presently unemployed or underemployed in green-collar jobs to do the work at these buildings, give the City Housing Authority more money to take care of poor people,